The King's Queen by Zira Zaknizin, Chapter 6, Levi's Point of View. Well, I asked. I sat on the edge of our bed, one leg crossed over the other as I glared at Aaron. He stood there like an idiot. His green eyes were glued on the floor, never daring to look up at me. I'm sorry, he sighed. I couldn't help but sigh as well. Kneel and say it again. I smirked. Surely the king won't kneel without a second thought. I found Aaron, the king of Sina, kneeling in front of me like an obedient dog. I could almost imagine his dog ears were pressed against his head and his tail laying limp at his side. I'm sorry. My breath hitched as I stared at those huge puppy dog eyes that he was giving me. Why do I feel like I lost the battle? Okay, I forgive you. Just promise to let Raphael go without his schedule. About that, Aaron stood up and sat next to me, his arms wrapped around my waist, and he hoisted me up until I'm sitting on his lap. Raphael asked me to keep his history class. He said he really enjoys history and wants to learn more specifically magic. Well, I gasped when Aaron buried his nose into my neck, indulging himself on the oils of my scent gland. If he really wants it, he can, but only for an hour or two in a day. I'm glad you agreed. The king whispered in my ear. And my queen, why the sudden change of heart? I yelped, feeling Aaron's arms around me tightened until I felt a bit painful. But despite the sudden change in his aura, I remained calm. What are you talking about? You've never allowed me to touch you. Why the change of heart? My mind worked on overdrive to provide a reason. No wonder Aaron was so eager today. When I wasn't able to reply, I could feel his arms tighten once more. Aaron, stop, you're hurting me. Really now? It sounded like a threat. I could feel the alpha behind me was ready to bite my head off. His scent started to grow heavy, forcing me into submission. What did I actually do before? Did I really hold back the sex that long? But none of those questions were able to leave my lips. Instead, I could only manage to let out an omega cry. I could feel Aaron tense once my cry reached his ears, his hold finally loosening around me, and I took the opportunity to jump out of his lap and slap him in the face, hard. Snap out of it! I shouted at him, since I had no idea of what I had done when I was crowned as a queen 2 years ago. I had to lay low. Hange didn't mention anything except that I loved the king and my child, but seeing Aaron's reaction now, I'm starting to doubt if I was a good husband. Look, whatever I did in the past is in the past now. Why can't we just forget it and move on to the future instead? I suggest sheepishly. Aaron just chuckled at what I said. Just forget the past. Levi, what happened to you? He stood up and towered over me. Well, people change, I guess. I shrugged, praying that Aaron would let go of his suspicions. But then I realized, why am I lying? Wasn't it much better to tell a king what happened to me? Maybe he could help me. Owen came back with nothing regarding the bandits and the attack on us. And on top of that, what was the connection between those bandits and me? Hanji said I recognized them. Aaron hummed, pulling me from my thoughts. If that's the case, then let's sleep. I'm too tired to dwell on this. Aaron walked past me and proceeded to the adjoining bathroom, closing the door behind him. I sighed. I have to admit I was a bit scared back then. Maybe things would get easier if I just told him that I had lost my memory when I was crowned as queen. But then maybe Hanji and Oren knew better, and I should consult them before tearing Aaron. I laid back on our bed, dismissing the thoughts, and forcing myself to sleep. It didn't take 5 minutes before I could feel Aaron join me in bed. I felt his hands on my body again. I'm sorry I scared you back there, he whispered in my ear as he pressed his body onto mine. You didn't scare me, I pouted, stopping the urge to rip his arms off my body. It was a weird sensation. It felt like my body needed to have his hands on me. Like there was a strong urge to be connected once again to my alpha. It was quite understandable because Aaron mentions that I held off sex for a year or so. I had no memory why I did so. I'm just worried. You're acting differently when you came back from your trip. It seems like the years passed so quickly. I have forgotten everything, I reasoned as I turned to face him. What exactly did I do to you? Aaron stared at me for a moment before sighing. You hated me for a reason that I couldn't point out. Maybe you did something stupid that you were not aware of. I forced a smile. I'm not sure. You never told me. You're so secretive. I can't simply read your mind. He smiled at me, pulling me closer until our bodies pushed flesh together. It could be that you suck in bed then, I teased, but seeing how shocked Aaron was by my statement, I couldn't hold back my laughter. Really? I'm just teasing, but maybe. I teased him farther. Queen Levi, you are vicious and cruel as ever. He purred my name, making me shiver involuntarily. How about I'll change your mind now? Aaron's point of view. I brushed my fingers on my queen's raven hair. It was already midnight and I couldn't seem to fall asleep. My mind kept repeating our conversation earlier. I noticed how Levi couldn't remember the things he did to me, to his son, to everyone. My father's always warned me to watch over my queen, for he could either be my death or my salvation. I thought that first Levi would be the death of me. He hated me. He didn't want anything to do with me or with anyone. It's not new to hear that kings were killed by their queens to get a hold of the power of the crown. That's what I thought Levi was planning before, and he just waiting for the right moment. But now, my queen came home, and he was never the same as he was before. He's always smiling. He wanted to spend time with me and his son. Not to mention, he was nice to everyone, which caused a huge shock. At first, I thought that Levi was only acting. Maybe this was his way to get closer to me and only kill me. But after our conversation, he didn't seem like lying. He sounded sincere, that he had no idea what he had done before. Could it be they had an accident on the trip and had lost his memory? I sat up and stared down at my sleeping mate. I pushed away his bangs, trying to feel for any scars on his head. There was one. It seemed like all the pieces were coming together. It had to be Hange's idea. I know that Beta meant well, but what she did could be a crime of treason for keeping this from me. However, Levi was much happier, king and lying back compared to before. That attitude couldn't be built in a week, which means this was Levi's true character before we were wed. What caused the sudden cruel and ruthless side of him to emerge during our 2 years of marriage? Could it be that he liked someone? I almost growled at the thought, but in the end, I sighed, knowing that all my questions would be answered tomorrow when Levi was awake. Also, I should keep this to myself and see how much Hange's or Owen's influences Levi's character. This time, I'll finally get to know my queen. End of chapter 6.